Hey everyone, in this video I want to show you how to catch big bass off the bank. I've been blessed, I have a boat, but a lot of people out there don't have boats, and I want people to realize that you can go out and catch big bass off the banks. There's a few lakes I fish, they're public lakes, and they won't allow you to have a bass boat out on those lakes or any kind of boat, and I have to fish off the bank. So in these videos I want to show you how to go out and how to catch these big bass from the bank. Definitely a good fish. Beautiful fish. Just caught this beautiful largemouth. It's late February. We've had a little bit of a warm spell. It's been a mild winter. I just slowly dragging a worm. Caught this beautiful fish. They're really pulling up. Shallow this time of year when it's getting, when we have mild winters, this is the time to catch them. When you get about 3 or 4 warm days in a row, go out and catch fish like this. I'm blessed to caught her. I'm going to go ahead and put her back in. I want to talk about a few things that are really important to catching big bass off the bank. And first off, you want to be going fishing a lake that has big bass in it. You want to be going somewhere where you've either seen big bass before or caught big ones before, or you've heard of people saying there's really big ones in there. That's the first most important step. You want to be somewhere where there's big ones at, and you definitely want to be paying attention to their forage. I like to target places that have trout in them or kokanee. They're really high in protein, and some really big bass grow in waters that hold trout and kokanee. Also, you want to be throwing baits that are going to catch big bass. You want to be throwing stuff such as swim baits, and if you're worm fishing, you want to be throwing big worms, such as like 6-inch worms or 8-inch worms. You want to experiment with what color and things like that. But also, another important step is being there during the right time of year. The best times of year, in my opinion, to fish off the bank are anywhere from January until late May or early June. After that, it gets pretty tough. In the summertime, it gets pretty tough during the day. You can still catch some, but in the summertime, your best bet is going to be at night, obviously. Bank fishing at night could be pretty good during the summertime, but in the spring is probably your best bet in going catching a big bass off the bank. I was blessed this year, caught many big ones during February. It seemed like February was my best month, and maybe April. When you catch a big bass and release it, keep fishing just as hard as you were before you caught it, because usually you have a great chance at catching another giant. These fish in these pictures were all caught during the same day, almost back to back. And another very critical step is throwing baits that are going to catch big bass. You want to be throwing things such as big swim baits, of course, like this MS Slammer, Rat. You want to be throwing baits like that, and you want to be patient with them. And that goes for even if you're fishing on a boat. It doesn't really matter, and it's hard for a lot of bank guys to throw big swim baits, because if you get hung, you don't have a boat to get in, just go out there and get your bait back. But I promise you, it is worth throwing swim baits off the bank. I've been blessed and caught many great fish on the swim baits. And the number one thing about throwing swim baits is you've got to be patient with them. I've learned that if you're not patient with them, you won't catch very many fish on it, if any. Swim baits are really important though. You want to be throwing big swim baits from the bank. Topwaters are another great option for catching trophy bass from the bank. Some topwaters I like to throw are like a Savage Gear duck, or a big Zara spooks, and big wake baits such as like a redfin. You want to be throwing those larger styled topwaters, of course. And just like swim baits and big worms, you got to be really patient with them and just keep throwing them. And you want to be throwing them when fish are actively feeding on top. Another bait that I really love to throw, if they're not biting swim baits very good, is a big worm. Pretty much you can either rig it weightless, fish it on Texas rig, shaky head, whatever. You just want to be throwing larger worms. If you want to catch some of those bigger fish, you want to be throwing some of those larger worms, such as 8-inch, 10-inch worms or whatever. And you also want to be throwing those bigger sizes, those bulkier baits. And if they're not eating the bulkier ones, you also want to, you want to try a skinnier one. But you really have to experiment with that, just like the swim baits. You have to experiment with sizes and colors and see which one they like the best. Another really important step a lot of people miss is wearing something that's not really bright while fishing on the bank. If you're wearing a bright colored shirt like this one, usually the fish are going to see you. You want to wear something either like a camouflage shirt or just a dark colored shirt that the fish aren't going to see really well. And you also don't want to be making a lot of noise, such as, walking loudly. You want to walk pretty quietly, and you don't want to get very close to them. I tend to stay a little further back from the water. I've caught a lot of great fish that way. That's a really important step. See, a lot of people make that mistake, and it usually spooks bigger fish, and that's really important to catching big bass off the bank. During the spawn, of course, is a great time to be going fishing for big bass. You'll see a lot of males and females getting ready to bed. I've seen some great ones this year, but actually, surprisingly, this year I caught most of my big fish I caught were not on bed or not spawning. I caught one or two decent ones spawning, but other than that, I didn't catch very many big ones or see very many big ones this year spawning, because our weather was kind of messed up and it got warm and cold, and water levels kind of messed it up. You got to really pay attention to things like that, because that can definitely mess up the spawn for you. But you also definitely want to be fishing during the brim spawn. Off the bank a few years ago, actually probably 2 or 3 years ago, I seen the biggest bass I've probably ever seen in my life. I was on the bank and the bluegill were spawning, and I seen 2 bass. One was probably 8 pounds, 8 or 9 pounds, and one that was with it that was kind of behind it. It had to be probably either 15 or 16 pounds. I've never seen a bass that big. I've been blessed. I've caught some good ones. I've caught a 10-pounder. I've seen lots of 10s and 12s and 13s, but I've never seen one that big. And she was up there, eating those bluegill, I'm sure, and she was all around where they had been bedded at. And you definitely want to be fishing bluegill imitators then. You want to be throwing, bluegill swim baits or even topwaters. I know big poppars work really well during that time of year. But you definitely want to have something that looks like a bluegill, either colored like one or maybe shaped like one. That's really important, and you definitely want, if you're fishing off the bank, for sure you definitely want to be there during the bluegill spawn and of course the bass spawn. Using a wacky rig can be a very effective technique for catching trophy bass from the bank. You will go through lots of small fish doing this though, such as this one I'm about to catch. But using this technique and altering your size, such as using a larger worm or a big bulkier profile, you will catch some really nice bass using this technique.